welcome to another episode of Reptile Fight Club. I'm your host, Justin Julander, and with me is Mr. Rob Stone, a.k.a. Bob Rock. How you doing, man?
All good. Excited to be here. I'm really excited for our guest today.
Yeah.
Guest and topic. Yeah.
Right? There we go. Yeah, so without further ado, Zach Baez, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Yeah, am I saying that right? Is it Baez or Baez?
Technically, when your name ends in a Z, it gets a little crazy, but it's Baez, Zach Baez, like Joan Baez, but not related.
Okay. Not related.
No.
Do you sing?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Only in my car. Go in the shower.
Yeah. As we all tend to do, right?
Yep.
Cool. Welcome to the show. Zach is over on the East Coast. Kind of. Are you close to Eric and Owen and those guys?
I'm about 45 minutes away from Eric and probably about an hour away from Owen. So
okay.
I'm in
Jersey.
You
in? Oh, you're in Jersey. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, it was great to see you at Carpet Fest and catch up a bit and see your amazing photography.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
That was a good time. So yeah. And I'm sure we'll get into that a bit here soon. But I don't know how's everything going? You having a good season so far? Or, I don't know. Do you keep much anymore, Zach? Or do you have any?
I keep some. Right now, I have a group of Phyllobates terribilis, the golden poison dart frogs. So I keep a group of those. I've been raising those and breeding them for the last 6 years.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, they're awesome. Other than that, I have one chameleon. So I have one pardalis, who I love dearly. He's very spoiled. But that's it. No snakes. That's on purpose because snakes are like potato chips. So I told myself,
that's true.
Once the collection dwindled down to none, I said, that's it. I can't start it up again.
A reformed addict in action there.
Totally sober on the snakes. That's right.
Yeah. That's hard to do. I don't know that I could do that.
It was really tough. And it's tough every day. Every day it's tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can see that. But I mean, I think you've made a reasonable trade. So, we'll get into that a bit. But,
correct.
That's I do enjoy dart frogs other than the fruit flies. That's the downside to those things, but they're really cool animals. I was really surprised how long-lived they are. I didn't realize, when I got into them that they live, 20 plus years sometimes. So that's kind of cool. Yep. And the terribilis are one of my favorites. They're really neat. You said you have the yellow ones? Yeah,
I have yellows. So they're I have yellows, and then about 3 years ago, something I guess you could call it a morph. I'm still trying to prove it out. Popped out of my line, so I'm working with those.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. But really interesting frogs, super bold, always out. They beg me for food every day. Super cool animals. So I highly recommend them if you haven't had them before.
Yeah, those are great species. There's so many cool herp species, that's for sure. If I just had more time, more room, more money, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, what kind of setup do you have them in?
They're like a 36 by 18 by 18. I have how many do I have now? I have 2 adult groups, and then I probably have something in the neighborhood of about 30 babies. So
nice.
They produce a lot, so
very prolific. Do they take forever to hatch and grow out from the tadpole stage? I mean, what's the time you're looking at there?
Between times that the eggs are laid, by the time I get to them before the females eat them, because sometimes they will do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I keep them in groups, so if one of the females just wants the male's attention, she'll eat the eggs. So you kind of have to pull them pretty quick. But by the time I pull them and they're out of water, I guess, as we call it in the frog hobby, I would say at least 2 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little longer. It really depends on the weather. If it's cool in the house, if it's warmer in the house, they grow a little faster. If it's cool in the house, obviously slower. So, it's almost like keeping fish in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
With the tadpoles. So, it's, how much you feed them depends on how quickly they grow. I mean, same stuff. So, But usually it takes a couple months to get them going, and then at least a couple of another months before they're ready to go.
That's kind of, I guess I kept Tinctorius for quite a while, and same kind of thing. You just like almost forget you had them. They took so long to, it was like you said, like having a fish tank in addition to the frog. So it's kind of fun. Got the two different stages. I guess, you think, I think about the local amphibians, and they are typically like, from egg to frog in, less than 2 months, because their water source is drying up, but I guess the rainforest creatures don't necessarily have that problem.
Correct. Yeah. And I also think, at least when Tinctorius, they're cannibalistic, the tadpoles, so you raise them kind of separately and singly and that sort of thing. But Phyllobates, they're communal. So,
nice.
They're good to be raised in a group. So,
okay.
Yeah, so that makes it a little bit easier, because all you really do is taking care of one tank. But it's still the same thing. Really cool though. It's really, really fun to see all the stages. Yeah,
that's cool. I would have a bunch of different cups, clear cups with one tadpole each. So I guess
that's right.
I'd forgotten that they were that was the reason for that. It's been a while since I've had them. So they're cool though.
Yeah, they'll also produce a hormone, believe it or not, the Tinctorius, in the water, so that way the frog that hatches first, or the tadpole that hatches first, actually will release a hormone to stunt the growth of the other frog. So
wow.
It's crazy. It's like chemical warfare from birth. Yeah.
Wow. Against your own siblings.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. There's some really interesting behaviors with dart frogs, with where they place tadpoles in different bromeliads, and they'll visit and lay eggs in each of the bromeliads for the food source and stuff. It's just incredible. Yeah. Definitely understudied, but very cool. Nice.
And I think the cool part about Cereblus, right, is that I guess, that boldness is associated with being the most toxic vertebrate, right, in the world.
On the planet. Yep.
Yeah. That it's like, well, they're not afraid of anything. So that makes them, especially in that without that toxin in them, makes them an ideal captive, as opposed to some of the smaller stuff that doesn't have quite that potency. So it doesn't have that same level of bravado to it.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. Yep. You want to get those toxic ones, so you see them out and about.
Doing stuff. And when you're talking about the hormone being released right by the first one that is capable of doing it, essentially, there was something around cane toads, right, that came out, research in the last 6 months to a year, that was then put into sort of popular media, where they actually are releasing a hormone that's increasing the rate of cannibalism, or increasing the rate of predation amongst others, something like that, right? So to your point, super interesting in all the complexities of the natural world, right? Again, right, the cosmic octopus exceeding our capacity to understand it, right? All these different subtleties, additionalities.
For sure.
Amazing.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. There's some amazing things that occur in the wild, for sure. That's part of the fun of it all, I guess, is getting out there and finding this stuff. So cool. And then I'm assuming it's a male panther chameleon.
Yeah. It's a male.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
Yep.
They're so beautiful. It's it's a fun thing to have, for sure. Nice. Well, I guess maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe a little bit of background and where you fit into herpetoculture.
Oh man. Born and raised in New Jersey. I've been into reptiles, I guess, like everybody else, most of your life, chasing stuff in the backyard, keeping stuff that you find, all that sort of thing.
Now, did you grow up close to the Pine Barrens? Were you out running around there?
It's interesting because I grew up close to the Pine Barrens, but it was, I don't know how to say this, but the Pine Barrens have a certain reputation, and certain folks for a long time never felt welcome in the Pines. It's changing a lot now, but at the time it was not something that a couple Puerto Ricans from the Bronx went to go hang out in. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I wasn't able to hang out in the Pines too much growing up. I'm making up for that now.
Nice.
But yeah, at the time that wasn't the case. And so mostly just when we went on camping trips and stuff, I would get out there. I'd spend the whole camping trip out by the pond, fishing, catching frogs, the normal stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. And then kept reptiles for pretty much my whole life. Really got into carpet pythons. What was it? At least 15 years ago, maybe at most.
Yeah.
Had a few clutches of that, had a few breeding seasons of that. And then just through life and things I needed to get done, I couldn't keep anymore. So I let go of the collection and then focus heavily on field herping. And that's and specifically international field herping, because it combined my love of travel plus my love of reptiles and my love of photography. So if you kind of combine those three things together, it's the perfect storm for that. So
what a combination.
Never look back. Yeah. Look back.
Yeah. I mean, you do all those very well. So that's why we wanted to have you on here to kind of chat about that. But absolutely. Like I said, I was just in awe of your photographs and, all the trips you've been on. Really cool stuff. And it makes me question whether I want to ditch my collection or not. That's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess that kind of leads us into the discussion we're going to talk about is, so part of it is, Rob and I both kind of enjoy planning herp trips and kind of figuring out where to go and all these kind of things. And a lot of, your international herp trips have been with, like guided herp tours. We kind of wanted to compare and contrast, I guess, those two different styles and kind of the pros and cons of both. So
sure.
We brought you on to discuss that topic. Should you do a guided herp tour, or is it better to plan your own? And I'm sure, we can all fall into both categories. So of course, we need to be prepared to defend either side here, but where you're the expert in the guided trips, and we probably don't know that. We're probably not going to pick that side because it'll maybe be a little harder to defend, but who knows? Maybe we'll throw you a loop here and we'll see how it goes. But so first off, we'll flip the coin between Rob and I and to see who gets the pleasure of fighting with you tonight.
Sure.
So I'll let Rob call the toss here.
Okay. Heads.
It is tails.
Tails.
So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. Man, I think Rob has the passion on this one, so I might let Rob go ahead and debate you, and I'll moderate tonight.
Fair enough.
How does that sound?
Fair enough. Sounds good to me.
Does that work for you, Rob?
Yeah, that's all good.
Okay. And then I'll flip the coin again for you guys. Zach, why don't you call this one? And then you guys can pick
tails.
It is tails. So you got the choice of which side you want to take.
I'm going to get this real easy for us. I'm going to defend herp tours.
Okay. All right. You'll take the side of guided herp tours are great and wonderful, and that's how we should herp. And Rob will go with plan your own trip. And
I want to go that far.
Yeah. Now, as winner of the coin toss, of course, you get to decide if you go first or if Rob goes first. So.
Oh man, I think I'm going to go first. Actually.
Okay. Wow. The anti-Chuck here. Chuck would always make me go first if he won the coin toss. So that's very benevolent of you. Yeah.
No, I think I have to go first because I think I have something to prove here a little bit. So
all right.
I'm going to go ahead and go first.
I like it. Come out swinging.
Yeah. No, what was it, about a couple of weeks ago? I heard you guys on this podcast, of course, and I heard something that Justin said. Justin said, those herp trips, those tours, I don't think I'd have fun on one of those, and I would disagree.
Okay.
And that's when it spurred me on. I was like, whoa. Hold on. Wait a minute. I don't think he quite understands how they are. So maybe if I get on there and we talk about it, maybe I convince him one way or the other. And so we'll see. We'll see how I do.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. I mean, you reached right out to me and said, hey, I'll take that. I'll take that argument.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'll take that fight. So kudos, man. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
No worries. So I'm going to say probably, this might be kind of interesting, I think, because this could be both a pro and a con, depending on the kind of person you are, depending on how gregarious you are, I guess we can say. Mm-hmm. But for me, the biggest pro I could ever say about herp tours or expeditions, however you want to coin them, is the fact it's the people you meet. to me, that's number one. I can't tell you how many tours that I've been on and the people I've spent those 2 weeks in the jungle with or in the desert with or whatever have become lifelong friends. And these are friends that I've met from all over the world. And so it becomes hard to do that without these kind of trips. Mm-hmm. And so you get a big perspective on a lot of different people coming together with a shared interest, people from different backgrounds, people from different countries, all coming together and being one and having this one solid goal to find as many reptiles and amphibians as you can and kind of enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And for that, it's hard to beat a tour, frankly, because you don't get to pick who comes with you, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're an antisocial person, probably not for you. To be totally honest with you, if you like people, if places like Carpet Fest get you excited and you want to meet new people, you want to talk about reptiles and amphibians in nauseam for 2 weeks, then I'm going to say that tours might be for you. On top of that, not only do you get to meet new people, you get to become friends with those people. Those people then invite you to their trips, right? And so what one opportunity can then blossom into more opportunities. And those trips that aren't public or those trips that aren't, being toured, essentially, you get invited on. You get invited to meet people in different places. I have apartments all over now if I wanted to crash somewhere. And so that is an amazing thing that is hard to get if you were to go solo. Yeah. No, so without a doubt, that for me is the big one. That is the big one for me.
That kind of takes me by surprise. I wouldn't have considered that. I guess, do you have any examples of the opposite of that, where you've been stuck with somebody for a couple of weeks where it's been like a little miserable? Or
I'm not going to name names because that would be unfair.
We don't want you to name names, but
I'm not going to name names. But there's been obviously situations, and so it's tough, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to a tour, you want them a certain size, but you don't want them too big, but you don't want too many people or not enough people. You kind of want a good mix. Yeah. And, like to me, that 8 to 10 is probably like where I'm hitting my maximum. Okay. But there's enough people where you can kind of get away from each other too, which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. Is that about the size of trips you're doing? Is about 8 to 10?
Anywhere from 8 to 10 to up to 12, maybe even on a crazy big trip, maybe up to 16. Okay. But usually it's lower than that. So look, ultimately, and not everyone gets along, and that's one of my cons as well. Not everybody gets along, and so with enough people, you can kind of shelter yourself away from certain people that you maybe don't necessarily get along with, and so that's good. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, I've gone on herping trips with just me and somebody else in the car for a week, and by the end of that week, you want to kill them. So, there's that part of it too. So at least you get that kind of,
switch up.
Spread out a little bit. So you get to talk to different people and kind of, maybe this couple of days you're spending a lot of time with this person. Next couple of days, spending a lot of time with that person. That's what makes it really fun.
Very
in my opinion. Yep.
Okay, Rob, let's hear what you got to say about that.
Well, you fit neatly into one of the things that I wanted to talk about, not necessarily as a negative, but just in terms of a curiosity, right? In terms of the dynamics of variable group sizes, things like that. Saying even, right, not only sort of inherent personality, I do think you're totally right? If for the most part, my stuff is not solo versus 10 to 12 people. It's more like, I think our normal group size is more like 4 to 6. But to your point, that's all people that I know to some extent, right? And for the most part is actually like sort of a revolving cast and crew where like a trip might have a new person, or it might be a person who's new to other people on the trip, but who I've known for a long time or whatever. So just sort of there is an interplay there, but it's certainly not the random stranger, save when we're experiencing local culture, however that sort of takes shape, right? But that obviously is not the same level of relationship and impact as being traveling about with folks for better and worse for 2 weeks. What I did want to ask, kind of with a group that size, and maybe this is more reflective of the particular trips you've taken, does it seem like everyone is sort of pulling in the same direction? Because even on trips that, sort of I've led, so to speak, that's not always the case, right? Both in terms of what folks are interested in seeing, or even just the willingness of, hey, if as Justin knows, right, both he and I like to push it a little bit, and sometimes not everyone that's not the speed that they're looking for, or it doesn't always make sense with a particular group dynamic, or however it plays out, right? So I can only imagine that in a situation where people are more like, oh, well, I saw this tour company on Instagram or heard good things or whatever, and I paid my money, that you might have an even broader range of willingness to play along in that context than in mine, where it's more of a curated group. And I would imagine, that your friends who host their tours probably love to have repeat customers as opposed to people that they're not familiar with. I'm sure that is a big part of it, but if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. So yeah, of course, that goes without saying, right? Obviously, you would want people who have gone before to be at least some. So it just makes it a little bit easier for everybody, if that is the case, if people know what the gist is. So that's pretty good. But you're right. I think it could, if the tours, or if the leader of the group is regimented enough, understands what we're doing, what we're not doing, and kind of is able to, I guess, herd cats in a lot of ways, it makes it a lot easier. But I think that's also the fun of it. I think, yeah, I may not have this interest in X, Y, Z. Like a lot of the birds I'm walking right by. There's a lot of birders that go on these trips, believe it or not. So maybe they're interested in the bird. They're interested in this arachnid. They're interested in these bugs. They're really into plants. You get a lot of different kinds of people. And so you're right. Sometimes it could be, hey guys, we didn't want to go hard for this. We want to go hard for that, but half the team's tired. And, there is those occasions, of course. Mm-hmm. But I don't think there's ever been a time where I've been on these trips where I'm like, there's not enough herping. There's plenty of herping. That's why you're there. Sometimes, in my opinion, sometimes it feels like it's too much herping. It's like, my God, can we maybe not? Can we do something can we do something else? Can we just and there's opportunities for you to maybe not go on the night hike, maybe not go on that part of the trip, stay at the hotel, whatever it is, wherever you are. And as a result, you can kind of tailor it to what you like and what you don't like. But yeah, there is a dynamic there that, you could look at it as a con or a pro.
I'm curious on your trips, how many repeat, what number of people do you get going on the same trips? The next trip, I guess you could say, or the subsequent trips. How many repeat customers are you going with on average?
Oh man.
Is there usually one or two guys that
at
on
least
all of them, or
at least. Okay. There was the last tour we took. Myself was the only person who's been on a tour before.
Okay.
That was, I believe, Namibia was like that. And so I'm sorry, I'm the second person. Yeah, so I guess there is. It really depends. But yeah, there's usually at least a couple people who have been on the tours before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, and you hit on a point there. Just in terms of the extent to which these tours sort of have modality, where you have side adventures or open to possibilities, right? Is it everyone's captive and along for the ride? And I'm sure the answer when you're going from place A to place B and in a one-way fashion, the answer has to be yes. But to what extent that sort of, and not that that's any different from the way that I would lead a trip, but I'm just out of curiosity.
Exactly.
Mine, you're probably more captive, to be honest, regardless of the situation. So I'm just curious.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, that's really good. I guess the kind of going to one of the fundamental joys of a trip for me, and Justin I know as well, is the idea of the pre-planning and sort of the sense of agency and directive, and kind of being able to invest that time on the front end. Do you generally enjoy that, or do you, is that not half the experience or whatever for you? Do you just, it's really about seeing the thing more so than it is sort of that getting that real type A enjoyment on the front end as well?
I think it comes down to, frankly, for me, it comes down to probably time, effort, those sorts of things. And it comes down to information. I'm often places I'm really interested in visiting are not places that you can necessarily get a lot of information about, or you need somebody on the ground to kind of curate some of that information. And so, while yes, I'm sure there could have been some of the trips I've taken where I could probably have put something together that was halfway decent and similar. To me, it's where am I investing that time and that effort? That's not to say I'm not preparing for a trip, right? We're looking at the itinerary, you look at itinerary, okay, where should I be looking, that sort of thing. You do a lot of pre-planning anyway. Okay, what kind of camera equipment am I bringing? What kind of flashes am I bringing? Do I think it'll be good for this? Do I think it'll be good for that? Doing some practicing at home, right? And those sorts of things kind of prepare me. Reading every guidebook I can find on the place, so that way I understand what I'm looking at when I do find it. All those things are still pre-planning, and so I do get enjoyment out of preparing for an expedition without necessarily having to feel like I need to call the hotel or I need to call the lodge and try to get, that to me, that's not the fun part. Like to me, I want to learn about the place. I want to learn about the culture. I want to learn about the language. Even I want to learn as much as I can about where I'm going. And if I could spend all my time doing that rather than necessarily calling hotels and booking this and booking the car and doing all that, and I could literally offset that to somebody else and pay somebody to do that essentially for me, then to me, it's money well spent. I manage stuff all day. I manage a $6 million furniture store. So I'm tired of managing stuff. So that's a part of it. Like I don't want to call people, try to book this, book that. No. Listen, I do that all day long anyway. So for me, I get enough practice with that. And I don't feel like I'm losing anything by, again, offsetting that to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I don't necessarily mean the pure logistics stuff. I don't particularly enjoy that either. That's just a necessary evil that comes. I mean, more in the context of like, particular trying to suss out particular spots that you would want to hit or whatever. Although I think, so you alluded to it there. I do think an important context for this is, I've traveled to 35 or 40 countries or whatever, but in terms of herping, my experience is I'm talking about the United States and Australia in terms of these trips to this point. So I do think that's a really important context and is a real pro, given particular context for your side. So we'll hop there in 1 second. Before we get there, the one sort of practical question I had is in terms of beforehand. So if we're talking about the planning in my vein, right, in terms of saying, okay, where might be spots or habitat niches within a particular national park or whatever it is, right, entity, wherever you're going, saying, oh, maybe this is the sort of habitat that I want to be looking at, or if I'm looking at this habitat, this is what I might see, that sort of thing. Do you have a clear sense of the itinerary beforehand, meaning like literally we're going to this, maybe not this parcel versus this parcel, but in terms of saying you have a real good idea of where you're going, or is it more like you're just sort of, you'll be getting on the bus and the bus will go where it goes? Is it more like the first one or more like the latter?
No, it's actually more like the first one. So the itinerary, so two things. And every tour group is, again, I can only speak from the folks that I've worked with.
Which company do you mainly go with?
I go with Herpetological Education and Research Project. So Herp out of Belgium. They're a Belgian company.
Cool.
I think they do. I could gush about them for days, so I'm not going to do that right now. I could do it maybe a little bit later. But, because I work with them at this point almost exclusively, a few other trips I haven't done with them, but they do such a good job in making sure that you kind of get a gist of what the trip is going to be like. The concern is, listen, ultimately they are a company, right? and they do run these it is IP, right? What they know about that area is their research and ultimately their intellectual property in a lot of ways. And so you can say, so they give you a lot of itinerary, at least a general gist of what's going on. And only until you, I guess, put your name on the list, sign up, at least, do a little bit of a deposit, something like that, where you get the full itinerary. And that just makes business sense, right? Yeah. What you don't want to do is start shocking out your itinerary to everybody so they can go ahead and do the same thing you're doing, or just literally run their own. I mean, these things you have to protect. So in that way, yes, I don't really know the full gist of the plans until obviously after I've signed up. And then usually, I mean, they're very good at what they do. So everything I'd want to see, it's on there, right? So usually they're pretty good at saying they tend to go maybe for as I guess higher variety. They like those high counts of as much biodiversity as they can get you. And sometimes that could be conflicts, right? So there's that. So, but generally, I would say the itinerary is pretty much given to you. You know pretty much every night where you're going to be, and so you kind of this area I want to target. This is what I really want to be looking for, and so we all come with target lists when we get there for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of agreement that you won't share their itinerary or the spots that you go to, or is it just kind of a courtesy that you know what I mean? Like if you had a good friend and he wanted to take you to some country that you've been, would you be able to show him those spots, or is that kind of like something you've said that you would not do? That kind
I think I think everything is relative, right? So no, if I took somebody to one of these countries and I wanted to show them, for instance, right, let's just Ranamafana, right, in Madagascar. Everybody's going to Ranamafana, right? Nobody's been visiting Madagascar and not going to Ranamafana, right? So there's certain areas which are kind of no-brainers. It's just the access to other areas maybe is potentially not feasible without local guides on the ground, people that sort of thing. So, but generally, most of the time I could probably take somebody out there and it would be no problem. But that's what I would do regardless. Those are not some secret spot. A lot of the places we're going anyway. So, it's not some other areas, some different countries could be different on that. But generally speaking, I think what they don't want is for me to be like, all right, well, this is going to be Zach's Herp Tours, and I'm going to start charging people and taking them and taking their whole itinerary and doing that. Sure. That would be obviously not okay.
Yeah. Okay.
It just makes sense.
For sure.
Yeah, I think, okay, cool. I guess the one, and I have a guess on this, and maybe how it'll be presented, but it'd be good to hear one way or another. Say that there's a trip to a place that has a ton of diversity, and there's almost within the constraints of the trip, there's too much, right? There's an abundance of choice. Are they open on the front end to input to say like, and maybe this means on the trip before, if you're on trip A with them and they're still figuring out what the next one's going to look like, either at that same place or a different one, say like, hey, what about we try and hit X, Y, or Z, and maybe that won't mean, the thing that comes to mind for me, right? And JJ and I will be giving it a go again here not too long from now. Yeah. If you go to Kakadu, right, it's an incredible place, a huge range of diversity, but the abundance is relatively low of everything except Carlia. So that there are a couple things. If you find anything, it's probably going to be amazing, but it's probably not like a herp expedition sort of place, because there's the odds of just stumbling. It's not Costa Rica, right? The odds of just stumbling into, it could be anything out of this, 150 different herps, right? Is pretty low. And it might take you 4 nights to find one snake, but that one snake might be very well worth it. So obviously those are kind of competing aims, right? Are they open to input on that generally, in terms of saying, hey, on this next one, when we're coming back to Indonesia the next time, let's go to this island instead of this one. Let's go try and find a sawu python, even though that's a mess to try and do, or logistically, it's probably really hard. But would also be hard, I'd imagine, to do it if you were standing there with no local connection at all. So it's sort of that is probably a really tight, tough spot, right? I can imagine of saying like, well, we're going to a place with low abundance. The odds are not great, but at the same time, probably the only chance you have of getting there logistically, you would want a tour to make that happen.
Right. I hear what you're saying. I mean, yeah, look, especially after you've been on a few tours, obviously they take your input into account, especially when we're sitting around talking about what the next tour is, or especially if you're doing like a pilot tour, like some place they've never been to before, that sort of thing. Obviously, yeah, I've gotten questions like, what would you want to see? What would you want to look at? That sort of thing. I don't know necessarily that you would be able to change the itinerary as you see fit, because if everybody started doing that on a 8-10 man group, then forget it. It really kind of doesn't work out that way. I think you kind of have to understand that ultimately it is still a commercial venture, right? And so it's not. I would imagine that if you were to go on a tour and then decide, I want to see this island, that island, and you can probably make connections and get that done yourself, having been to that spot already, that sort of thing. I think that'd probably be okay. But I think that generally you're not going to be able to change the itinerary too much how you see fit.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes sense because right? Like everybody has been signed up for this specific thing. And then all of a sudden somebody says, you know what, but I want to go see this python on this island specifically. Can we take the 3 days to go do that? Probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Got the Cerebrus talking to us in the background there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, cool.
You'll hear them for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest pros of kind of doing your own trip is the flexibility to say, sure, look, the conditions aren't great right now for this spot. Let's move on. Let's go over here. Let's go over there, that kind of thing. So I think that's definitely on Rob's side of the argument here is the flexibility and kind of tailoring it to what you're focused on or what your thing is. But I imagine too, like with a herp tour, it's probably a one and done. I don't know that would you have interest in, I guess, is there a benefit to doing the same tour again? Maybe if it's, I don't know. What do you think? Would you ever go on the same tour twice?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Just because you've went once doesn't, to me, diminish. There's so many things I haven't seen still, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, for instance, we just came out of Madagascar, and so they've been to Madagascar 3 times now. Mm-hmm. And so the talk is, well, when we do another Madagascar trip, we're probably going to change the itinerary.
Okay.
Right? Because frankly, if we want people to come back, right, and who are interested in because Madagascar is huge. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go see certain other parts of the place, well, maybe we should change it for the next itinerary to get more people excited about it who have already been. So that's something that could potentially be done. But yeah, I think ultimately for a lot of places, it's going to be a one and done, right? Okay. Especially if you have as varied interests as I do. Or maybe, for instance, like Namibia, loved it to death. I want to go back, but I'll probably go back with just my girlfriend and I. We'll probably rent a Land Cruiser and go, camping and doing all that sorts of things, do some herping, but go and do different things while we're there, go rock climbing, things like that. Yeah. So there's reasons why I want to go back, not necessarily maybe on the same tour, but, there's always reasons to go back to anywhere.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And I guess to some extent, the guided herp tour would kind of give you your feet under you. You'd have a better sense of the layout without having to go through the pain of, the groundwork, all the nitty gritty, I guess you'd call it. And, sometimes you get an Airbnb and you get there and you're like, oh man, what is this place? This is not what it looked like online. So those kind of things can happen, but
that hasn't happened at all to us. I don't know what you're talking about.
Most of the Airbnbs have been fantastic. We won't talk about the exceptions,
most, but not all.
But those ones may have had diamondbacks in the yard though, so that was kind of cool.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's all right. So I guess I have plenty of more practical questions to kind of talk through, but let me start with I think what's one of the sort of critical questions, right, to enjoyment of the experience, especially if we're not talking about it in the enjoying meeting new people and those sort of the human-based side of this. Do you find anything yourself when you're on this trip?
Of course.
And when I say that, I recognize that whenever you're herping in a group, right, you're going to see lots of stuff that you weren't the first person to see, or, all these different things. And as much as within that group, then I think that there's actually sort of the common purpose and common goal and all those things that make it, it's still special. Right. I guess the question is, does the sort of commercial nature of the venture, does it diminish that at all? So that if it's like, oh man, the person that you're not getting on with in the 10 or 12 person group or whatever, they stumbled onto the thing, or the local guide is just like, it's like he's going to the pet shop basically, with, oh, I know it lives in this tree. Does that hit differently for you? Or no, it's just, I came to this place and I wanted to see this thing. And while it would have been ideal for you to be the person, ideal relative to your experience to, oh, you were the one who magically stumbled upon it or whatever. Does that hit differently? And if it does that, obviously you're advocating for it, so it doesn't diminish it to the point of not being enjoyable, but do you feel that aspect of that?
So I would say, yes, we do find a lot of it. And so there's not, frankly, it really depends on where you go. Some places like Costa Rica, I mean, everybody's finding everything everywhere, right? It's you're walking out of your room and you're almost tripping on a snake, right? It's like just Costa Rica's crazy. So when it comes to something like that, yeah, you're finding just as much stuff as anybody else is, and you're finding just as much animals as anyone else is. For me, I guess you have to separate either the desire to see the animal, the desire to photograph that animal, to be in an environment with that animal, to be in the presence of that animal. If all those things come before your ego, I think generally speaking, you're going to feel pretty good about it. But if we can be totally honest, in terms of herpers, there sometimes could be a bit of ego involved. And so there can be like, damn it, if I didn't see it myself, my own eyes by myself, then it doesn't count. Or, if I didn't flip that rock and my other buddy did, then it doesn't count. And so I look, for me, there's too much I want to see for me to start, I guess, painting myself in a box. And I think that's oftentimes what people do is they pick themselves in a box saying like, oh, the only kind of herping I want to do is this, that, or the other, versus in kind of keeping their eyes, keeping your, I guess, field of view a little bit wider and understanding that, it doesn't have to be you. Now, there's situations where it is the guide finding everything, and that does, of course, it tends to diminish the fun. Absolutely would. Where he's like, oh, it's there. Oh, I already found it. Oh, you see it yet? Like, and that could, sometimes your guides are too good where you're like, damn, man, let me find something, right? Yeah. That does happen. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but sometimes they're so good, they're almost too good. You're like, man, can you at least let me look a little bit? Like they're like that. You can also run into and look, we not necessarily on the trips I've been on, but you can have instances of staging. Of course. Of course. And so you have to be, you have to go with a group that has that moral code and that doesn't sit well with them. And for Herp, they that's not okay with them. And so they make sure that their guides on the ground understand that that's not something they're interested in seeing. And so there is that fine line, and that could be a little tricky. Some continents are more known for that than others. Africa is very well known for staged animals. So you have to make sure you're going with the right group and with the right guide so that doesn't happen. Because nothing hurts worse than, when you take photographs of something that you thought serendipity you have found and come to find out that it was in that guy's backpack all day.
Yeah.
that would burn. Right?
That wouldn't be as exciting. Yeah.
That would really kind of chap everybody's ass. So that's not something that
you have to be careful with.
You got to be careful with that. You got to be careful with that. But again, that's the reason why I do the tours, because I understand that they're doing that groundwork for me. If I were to contact somebody in East Africa and I want to do East Africa herping trip, and I contact a local guide, I don't know if that local guide's legit. I don't know if he's doing the right things. I don't know if he's going to take that animal and put it in his pocket after I walk away. I don't know what's going on. And so making sure that I'm going with somebody who is making sure they're doing that groundwork, that either has been there before, know who to talk to, those sorts of things, it just makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. I was in Costa Rica, and I went to this little, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's like a little forest preserve that was privately owned. And so you had to pay a fee to go explore it or whatever. But I asked, if they'd seen any snakes or, any areas to focus on. And there, there's a viper on, go on this trail and go to this number, stop or whatever, and you'll see it there. And so I went there, and there was like police tape around this little spot. Oh my God. And there was a viper on the forest floor in the middle of that. And I'm like, either that viper doesn't move a lot, and that very well could be. It was a Bothrops asper.
Yeah.
And so, that's possible, but also possible too that they just plunk it in down there and bring it in the night or something. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. But and they had like their residents that they knew about. That there was a beautiful green basilisk that lived in the pond, and I said, I'd love to see a basilisk. Go. There's one right over there. Go look right there. So I got to see it, but I didn't find it on my own. But I guess I'd rather see it in the wild than not see it. But of course, finding it yourself is a little more thrilling, especially if you've kind of mapped out where you might see that species and find one doing what it's supposed to do and all that kind of stuff. But definitely pros and cons, but that's
just like anything else with herping, right? Where you find the animal is sometimes just as, or how you found it, right? It's just as important as what you find, right? And that's always the case. So obviously if I hiked for five miles and I'm up a mountain somewhere and I'm by myself and I happen to find come across a prize hog, pretty good. It's a good day, right? Sure. It's definitely better if I road cruise back from the hotel to McDonald's and I found one, right? Right? So we can play those games. We can say, okay, that was a better experience than this one. And there's always been better experiences on the trip than others. There's always been some animals that were like a standout situation. Like on the last trip in Madagascar, where I followed that hognose, watched it dig up a whole nest, watch it eat, those eggs. And that was me. That was me that morning, waking up early on purpose, make sure I was out there on my own on purpose. And, and we were able to witness that. And that was
very cool. That
came out to be the standout situation of the trip.
Yeah.
Because again, it was me, it was all those things, but that doesn't say that the rest of the trip was not as memorable.
Sure.
It's just, that made that just a little bit more special.
Yeah. Yeah. There are definitely those experiences that just kind of stick with you forever. You're not going to forget those moments, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, right. So for instance, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know that Justin, you go on some tours in the Baja, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say you go on a tour to go see a whale shark. Mm-hmm. Does the fact that somebody else found that whale shark make it any different than you experiencing that whale shark in the water?
No, I mean, honestly, not for that, but
right. So where do we draw the line? Right. So for me, just being in the presence of that animal, being in that space, that to me is enough for me. I don't have to be like, I was the one that found it, because in terms of a group trip, you can end up, it's oftentimes not you. Mm-hmm. Like even if you're there with four guys, you have have 25% chance that it's going to be you that spot it first. So for me, I'd rather see a lot and I'd rather experience a lot, and that's why I do it.
I wondered, I had a quick question. Sorry if interrupting your flow, Rob, but I was wondering if you ever miss out on things because of like the size of the group. If you're over in this corner of, you're a ways away and they see like this cool venomous snake, but it goes down a hole. And so you miss out on seeing it. How common is that? Or do you all have radios and you can is it hard to find where the people are that are finding stuff if you're spread out?
Yeah, so it's tough. We always have hey guys, stick together.
Yeah.
Right? Make sure you're within like, a distance of each other. But,
Okay. So you're staying pretty close typically.
Yeah. It depends where you are, but there's been times where, I mean, when we were in Namibia, it's such a vast landscape that, that guy's on the other side of the mountain, right?
Yeah.
Then at that point, whatever, you bag it, what have you. But but what's crazy is I tend to take my time for taking photographs. I tend to lollygag a bit. I'm interested in a lot of stuff, right? Not just the reptiles. There's some people go on trips that all they want to see is snakes. They have no interest in any frogs, no interest in any. I have interest in a lot of things. And so that tends to make me sit in the back of the pack for a while. So I tend to be the guy trailing behind.
And spending more time with the animal.
Photographing it, doing what I got to do. But it causes opportunities where you miss things, right? Or that animal was in situ, and by the time you got there, not in situ anymore, right? Yeah. So you missed that beautiful shot of it on the rock, and now all that, and that happens. That's going to happen. Last in Madagascar, about a third of the team saw Fusa.
Oh, cool!
By the time we got there, Fusa was long gone, and so it's like they saw a glimpse of it, but still, at least they got to see it, right?
Yeah.
And so at the same time, you could say, well, because it was such a large group, that's why I didn't see it. Or you could say we're such a large group that gave them the chance to see it. Depending on how you look at things, right? You can look at it half glass full, half glass empty, right? So I tend to look at it like, listen, the reason why we're finding so much is because we're in a larger group. So if you end up missing out on something, as long as wasn't the target stuff, that's why you make sure everybody knows, listen, this is what I'm here for. So if you find one, you let me know. Don't be like, oh, that's the third one I saw or whatever, and keep walking. You let me know. That sort of thing. In some environments, again, like Costa Rica, there's so much stuff. In places in Madagascar, it was like you were tripping over stuff. It was crazy. And so there's opportunities. Yeah, you're not gonna see it all.
Okay.
I don't know why you would bring up venomous snakes going down a hole that we didn't get to see, Justin. We ended up paying that up in the end, but I can't imagine why you bring that up. That actually reminds me of kind of a question from that same day and tied in, you being interested in the photography and all that. Do you feel like you have the time to photograph and engage with an animal in this group setting that's like satisfying to you, right? So are you able to do that? And this is naturally counting in the question of sort of the ethic around time frame of exposure for that animal to people taking pictures and all that stuff.
Of course. So that's the big, right? That's the big ethical dilemma, right? For all of herpers, right? Especially as a photographer, you always have to kind of suss out what is okay, what's not okay, where that line is drawn. And yes, so there's opportunities where you are, right, if there's 10 people trying to photograph something, your time with that animal will be limited, right? It's just the reality of it, for the sake of the animal, for the sake of everybody to get their turns to take photos and things like that. That is a conflict. That's a conflict every trip. It always will be. That is the biggest con. Okay. Biggest con of the trip is of group trips. There's a lot of pluses, but the big con is that time with the animal, and I take my time, and so it's kind of known that I'm like that. So I usually I will wait until everybody's done. So I'm the last one. I could take my time a little bit more than maybe other people because I don't have to be the first one. But that may means I miss out on the sit-to shot. That may means I miss out when it was perfectly coiled up. These are things that I just have to accept as. If I want the time, I have to be on the back end. So that is the big con. However, for most people who take a few shots, cell phone shots, what have you, it's no problem. There is no issue. But yeah, it really depends. It helps when there's other photographers with you. So if you have other people in the group that are also just as interested in the photography as you are, then it becomes, you kind of sit around, you guys take your turns and it becomes a collaborative effort, which I think is also really cool. That's something that's often not talked about. So yes, while getting everybody to try to take the photo of the same animal could be a conflict, it also, you can look at it that, well, I'm also around these awesome photographers and we can bounce things off of each other. Hey, what about this? What about that? Hey, can you hold my light here? Hey, can you do? And so if you're with the right group and you're with friends and you're with people who also respect what you do in terms of photography as well, then it could be a collaborative effort. And that even, in my opinion, makes it even better. So again, it really depends. It really depends on your situation, how you look at it. But if you want full time with that animal, then, well, it may not be the trip for you.
I remember our trip in 2011 to Darwin. Nick Mutton had a camera that cast a red light every time it was trying to focus. And so like half my photos of the animal have like a red light on it. And I'm like, dang it, Nick, can you wait till we're done and then get your crappy red light camera in here?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a conflict, right? That's always going to be a conflict, but that could be a conflict in a group of 4 people.
Yeah. That's true.
It's not necessarily only, if all 4 of you really want to spend that hour with that animal, hopefully not an hour, but if you spend that amount of time with the animal and take your time, then, that can become a conflict, especially when the time's click. The time is, in my opinion, the minute you are interacting with the animal, the time starts going down. You don't have that much time to be fair to that animal, to be respectful, to be, not going crazy. If the thing is going through all 4 of its threat displays like 12 times, then my guy, you are way out of line and you should have let that thing go a while ago.
Does the guide step in at all?
Depends on the guide, depends on the situation, all those sorts of things. Herp do a really good job that even if the local guides, honestly, if I gotta be honest, local guides tend to be a little more lax than depending on where you are, than let's say even the host of the actual trip. And the host of the trip, Brian and Laura, they make sure that, guys, that's it. That's it. We're done. Last shots. You got 2 more shots each, and it's stressed out. We gotta let it go, or this is enough. We can move it on. And so they do a really good job of make sure they're regulating that as well, to make sure that nothing is being done that shouldn't be done, which I think to me is a plus.
Yeah.
I've been on Herp Trips where you've seen, even a friend of yours where you're not too happy about what they're doing. And you're like, ugh. It becomes kind of awkward to say, hey, dude, that's enough. Like, or hey, whatever. It's nice to have that third party be like, hey, we're done. Like, we've got enough. Yeah, that's true.
It always helps to have that third person saying, I think we've reached our limit with this animal.
Yep. Because if sometimes you get tunnel vision and you don't realize, like I've shot 150 photos of this thing. Like if I don't have it now, then I shouldn't be photographing anyway. So
it's true.
You kind of have to, like, usually somebody has to peel me away. So, and I tell them, guys, yank me out of there because I'll be there all day. So they're just like, all right, Zach, that's enough. Okay, I agree. One more,
One more.
It's always one more, right?
Yeah. I had a friend in New Zealand, and they found one of the Naltina species, the green gecko species, and they were and the one who found it was a native New Zealander, and he spent most of the time with the animal, and then when it was time for everybody else to photograph, he said, "Oh, this animal's too stressed out. We need to let it go." And so my friend didn't get any pictures of it in situ. Like he had one picture of it in his hand, and that's it. It's like, come on, why did you hog all the time when you live here?
Yeah.
So I guess even if you're not on a paid tour, you can still have that kind of experience, maybe.
Correct.
And maybe the guides are nice to kind of regulate it and say, hey, you've taken your share of the time. Now let's turn it over to somebody else, or, move out of the way so they can get the shot, in the right lighting or the right direction. So the sun's, right on it, that kind of thing.
Right.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I definitely fully, co-sign your point that is not unique to a commercial trip. It just, from my perspective, it was, if you're talking about 8 or 10 people, that's, obviously that's a lot more opportunity for that to happen than if you have 4 other people or whatever.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I do think that additional, to the point you both made about having a sort of neutral to semi-neutral third party there to sort of adjudicate and or, make sure that, the animal welfare is important. I think that's a great point for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Right. So I've done tours to the Galapagos. Let me tell you, the amount of regulation and things that happen in the Galapagos are, there's a guide next to you the whole time. There is not, you don't get to go to Galapagos by yourself. You don't get to plan your own herp trip to the Galapagos. It doesn't work like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain, right. So you don't get to do that. And that brings me to like one of my biggest second points is that guiding depending on where you are is a necessity. Right? Mm-hmm. There's some countries where you can't go by yourself. You just can't. You can't. Developing countries, it gets really dicey to go by yourself without having a local with you. The language, right? If there's a language barrier, again, easy when you're in Australia, you speak English, right? But if you're in middle of, I don't know, anywhere, Uganda or what have you, then it becomes a little bit more difficult the language barrier can be an issue. And so that's something that's
potentially dangerous. I mean, if you're,
correct. 100%.
In the wrong place 100%. At the wrong time, it can be really a sketchy thing.
Correct. What is okay to do? What is not okay to do? What are the superstitions? What aren't the superstitions? What are like, again, you to have that person there is worth it. It's definitely worth it and needed. So I think that's a big plus. I also think that if you think about the communities, ecotourism is good for the community. Yeah.
Well, there's a rule in Costa Rica that you can't go into the national parks without a guide. You can't go in there alone. So, sometimes the countries will dictate that. And I had my family over there, several children and my wife and my parents. And so each time you went into the forest and they charge per person, not like for the group or for the time. It was like you had to pay $50 per person every time you went in the park. It got a little expensive, so you have to plan on those kind of things too. I didn't realize that when planning the trip, but so that was kind of a shock to the wallet.
Right. Yeah. No, public land public lands are a privilege. They really are. And sometimes we're pretty lucky in the United States that we have a public park system, that we have national parks and state parks, and these are pretty accessible to us, and we're allowed to be there, and we're encouraged to be there, and we're supposed to be there. But that's not necessarily the case everywhere. And so you may be, so for instance, in Madagascar, those times where we were in national parks, of course, but there was also times where we were in this rural area where we were looking for these reptiles on the side of the road or in somebody's privately owned land. It's not okay for you to just trounce in there by yourself without that local guide being, hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. We're not going to be long, And so we have to sometimes separate ourselves from that and understand that those things are important and making sure that we are being welcomed into these places. It's a privilege for us to travel. 100%. It's a privilege for us to go to these countries and go look for their reptiles. Yeah. And handle them and photograph them and do everything else we do. It's a big privilege. And for me, doing that on my own, I would feel a bit like I'm taking advantage in some ways. And I think without the locals, at least blessing in a lot of ways or their benefit, then to me, it wouldn't feel right, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Good point.
Like it's again, easy, right? We go to the United States, we plan a trip, we're out there, we're hiking, we're backpacking, whatever we wanted, sleeping in the car, and that's great. But if you do that in somebody's rural field, it's not, you're trouncing on their plants on the way to looking for snakes. I've seen that. Right?
I've seen that. I've heard a fun story. I think it was on Mike Pinkleton's podcast, but they were herping in California, and all of a sudden these dogs came charging at him. They treat him basically. They had to climb up a tree to get away from the dogs. And then the owner came, and he's like, overalls, missing teeth. It's like, in California or somewhere else. But, and he had his gun and was pointing it at him and stuff. And they're like, we're just looking for our car. We got lost. We don't mean to be on your land, but it can be a little sketchy if you take a wrong turn. And I know even in like Australia, I think Rob has a story or two of getting on, private property or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and certainly winding up just the first trip and exercise in insufficient planning, right? Too reliant upon the local or semi-local or whatever advice to that was the big lesson I learned on the first trip to Australia was I never wanted to be in that spot again where it was like from, as you can imagine, Zach, I mean, shoot, you've heard plenty of those episodes where it was like, oh, come to Australia and we'll tell you, we'll take you out or we'll tell you where to go and all this stuff. We were way too reliant on the first trip. And because, again, we'd had at that point, 7 years of hearing that same sentiment. And I don't doubt that it was well-intentioned, but when it came down to it, it wasn't super useful. And definitely the lesson I learned, we saw some exceptional animals and all that and had a great time. That's not the question. But when I came home, my lesson learned was, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to be caught out not having done the research on my end. Right.
And right. So exactly. I think the reason why I started taking tours is out of frankly necessity for myself. Herpers can be like a bit like herding cats in a lot of ways, where it's like, all right, guys, are we going to go? Are we not going to go? We're not going to go. Are we going to go? Are you buying the tickets? Are we not buying the tickets? Like, what are we doing? Oh yeah. Well, let me talk to my wife and let me figure out what's going on. And you're like, oh my God. And so for me, I was in a place, to be honest, at the time when I decided to go on my first tour. We went to, I signed up for Costa Rica. I just turned 30 and I said to myself, you know what? I don't have any more reptiles really in my house. I'm itching to get out there. I'm just going to go ahead and book something. I would have loved to go on a group tour or a small tour where I could have had a bunch of my friends and we could have gone to do something. I just didn't have that luxury at the time. And so it was like, okay, if I want to go do this, I have to sign up and do this with somebody. And I did. And it's been nothing but a blessing to me. So that's another thing. I think it's a great start. A lot of people would love to go on herping trips, right? I would love to go to herping trips, but it becomes so daunting to say, okay, I got to figure out where I'm going to go, how I'm going to get there. I got to figure out the logistics, all that sort of thing. And while that can be fun, it also is a huge barrier to entry, right?
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, myself included, who didn't have the time to whatever, and also wanted to do it for my birthday, so I had kind of a bit of a time crunch there. It was like, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this, and it worked out for me. And so that's something to think about too. Is it's a great, and Costa Rica to me is like, again, I could gush about it because it's such a cool place, but it's like the gateway drug, in my opinion, to international field herping. Because it is so accessible. That country is built around ecotourism. Yeah. So it's so accessible. You feel like you're welcome. You feel like what you're doing, you're supposed to be doing. The locals want you there. All those things is important to me. And so it was the gateway drug for me, going to Costa Rica and going on that first trip. And so I wouldn't want people to feel like they can't go and do these things unless they did it on their own or were able to convince their 3 buddies to go with them or what have you. Because if I was doing that, I'd still probably wouldn't have gone. Right. Ultimately, I'd still be trying to convince people to go.
Right. And you kind of notice that as herpers find a group that they're compatible with and that they travel well with and that can make plans at the drop of a hat kind of thing, that are going to follow through and make the plans and go, then you tend to stick with those guys anyway. So, and it's a rare find to, herp with somebody like Rob, who's willing to put in all that time and put in all that effort to plan the trip. I think there's a lot of times on those trips, there's either, you might have somebody who wants to dominate and tell you, no, we're going here. But, it's a rare find to have somebody who's that into the planning but it also is flexible to say, yeah, we can do an alternative plan or we can do something else. And so, that is hard to find that. And I think when you do find it, you tend to kind of cling to that a little bit. But I think you're kind of getting that to some extent from your buddies on the previous trips. And so, that can evolve into that tight-knit group of buddies rather than a paid tour, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but again, it's always going to determine based on the tour and the kind of tour and the kind of guides and the kind of hosts. It's all, I guess, a lot of ways up in the air. And I guess that's possibly a con where you don't know exactly how it's going to go. Right.
Yeah.
And so, try it out. Be surprised.
Well, I had some frustrations because I was trying to book a tour in Costa Rica to go on a herp tour, somebody who knew the area, and had a place. And so I kept trying to book this group that I found through, an internet search basically, but it was kind of around the time of COVID or just after. And so I think that may have influenced this. So, it may have been just a one-off, but I could never get them to respond to my messages. It was just kind of, and when they did, it was kind of not very specific or helpful. I'm like, I'm here this day. Can you do the tour? Or they weren't in the area, or it's going to cost way too much money. So I think eventually I relied on a local that my daughter knew because she was there teaching English. And so she was able to find a group close to where we were that was reasonably priced and knew the area well. And so it was a really nice little trip, but that was kind of a headache and a stress trying to find a good, tour group to
correct
book, where I had to book a tour, or else I wasn't going to get out into into these areas. So
correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I think, this idea that it's still work, man. I mean, you're herping with guides, no guides, it's still work. Okay. I'm still getting chewed on by leeches. I'm still getting back with bleeding, sweating, the whole nine. It's still work. It's just, work.
But the most rewarding work of all, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, it's not easy. Like, just because I'm with a guide doesn't, I mean, sometimes it is, I'm going to be honest, but oftentimes it's not, right? You're still putting in that effort. You're still putting in the work. So it's not necessarily like going to the zoo, right? So.
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry.
No, all good. So I just had two practical questions, but I love the way this conversation is going. So Justin, if you had something there, go for it.
Oh, I just had a curiosity. If in Galapagos, are you sleeping on a boat or are you sleeping on the islands?
So I went on a liveaboard. So you're sleeping on the boat. And in my opinion, I think that's the only real way to do the Galapagos, in my opinion.
Okay.
Is to do it via boat. If you want to see the different islands. I mean, the Galapagos is very, very regimented.
Yeah.
You must be with a guide. Yeah. There is a certain, right. It's not, you don't just get okay, go have fun on the island. No, there's a certain trail you must be on. You're not allowed to leave trail. You're not allowed to use flash photography. You can only be on the island for X amount of time. Everything is regulated. Only 2 groups on the island at all time. I mean, they have it down to a science.
Yeah.
And so, that experience was not my normal thing.
Yeah.
But
very different trip, I'm sure.
Very different trip than a lot of my other herping trips. It's not, you can't really compare them.
Yeah.
However, not having to rely on flash photography made me a better photographer. Not having to, so
good challenges.
There's good challenges, right? But being on the boat all the time, going to island. I was fortunate where, there's some legwork too, right? Not all tours are created equal. And the legwork I did was make sure that when I booked the tour, it was going to be a tour that hit the islands I wanted to hit, that it was going to be in the right season. It was going to be at the right time. I did not do all that based on what a guide told me to do. All that research was done beforehand. And then I found a tour that would accomplish those things I needed. I needed a tour. I needed to happen sometime in January or February because I wanted breeding season for the iguanas, because I wanted to see the Christmas iguanas lit up. Right. That was my goal. Okay. Well, I got to make sure I get to the island where those things are at. Okay. Yeah. I got to make sure that so the tour that we ended up going on was not your classic Galapagos tour. It was the southern islands, which are often overlooked, but have the most diversity in terms of reptiles. So that's why I went. Right. Yeah. And so understanding all those things before I went, and then that panning out and that working for me and able to see, seeing female iguanas building nests and seeing male iguanas in full display colors and all those things. It was like, damn, like this is pretty good. I picked the right time to do this. So there was still part of that, even though it was in theory a guided tour. Right.
Yeah. But it was elements of your own preparation.
Correct.
And things like that.
Correct.
I remember Bob Ashley told me a story where they went for a swim and they came out of the water and there was a sea lion that had kind of laid on their shoes and towels and stuff. And they had to wait until you couldn't move the animal or try to shoo it away from you had to sit and wait. And I know Bob Ashley is not the most patient person out there. So he was pacing, waiting for that, thing to move off his stuff. But yeah, I thought that was kind of cool that you can't interact with the animals to get them to move off of your things. Or if there's a tortoise in the way of the tour bus, you have to sit and wait until the tortoise moves on its own time and not try to move it out of the way or something. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all great. Couple practicals, as I say. What does the cost look like to do something like this? And I'm sure it's variable based on where you're going and how long you're going. That's my other sort of practical question is what does an average sort of trip duration look like? Again, probably varies widely, but to the extent you can speak to your previous experiences. I mean, obviously, if it's a commercial venture, not only are you paying for your the host to go, right, and all the infrastructure and guides and all that to happen, but like then that presumably plus something. Is it affordable? In a really accessible way, in a semi-accessible way. You're doing really well, so you're situated to do that. But is it affordable to everyone? Is it sort of you wouldn't necessarily categorize it that way? There's an option at every price point, depending on how far you want to go. What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, just like anything else. Obviously, the length of time is going to dictate the price, but not necessarily. I think that the group I go with do a very good do a very good job at not necessarily. I don't ever feel fleeced, if that makes any sense. I don't ever feel like I overpaid. Oftentimes I feel like the opposite, where I'm like, oh my God, we're doing so much, and that's not the case. But I don't know. Well, let's say a 2-week trip. 2-week trip with everything, and usually most of the trips, food, everything's included. So it's usually, the only thing you're paying for is alcoholic drinks usually on these tours. Depends, but oftentimes that's the case because lots of times you have to book to make sure that we have breakfast in the morning, make sure that when we're out there, if we're out in the jungle somewhere, we're camping out there, that there's cooks there to cook for us, that those things are taken care of and they're all taken care of for you. So you don't have to necessarily worry about that. You could just, again, focus on the herping and enjoy that part of it. So as a result, like let's say like a 2-week trip to most places, I think it probably look like $2,500 or so. Which,
okay.
Is that with the flight or do you buy the flight?
That's going to be separate from the flight. That's going to be separate from the flight. So depending on where you go
on the ground. Yeah. Transportation, food,
everything. Yeah. Transportation, food. They pick you up at the airport, drop you off at the airport. Right. Okay. Gotcha. So, they're taking care of all that for you. So $2,500 to me for 2 weeks somewhere, not too bad considering, but look, not extremely cheap either. So it really depends. In my opinion, that's for most people that, they could put their money together and decide it's something they could do. I think it's affordable for most people. Galapagos obviously is going to be a little bit more money. Certain trips are going to be a little bit more, but I think that for most people, if it's something that you really want to do, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, fair enough. I suppose it doesn't make sense. This will be the reason that I can't come together as a commercial guy. One of the several reasons that we've talked about tonight that I couldn't come together for that, Justin, is that my goal is always to have people lose a pound or a pound and a half a day, on the trip. Not.
No, I gain weight on these trips.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy to me.
If you go on a trip with Rob, you need to make sure that you plan ahead to have food because you may or may not be stopping somewhere for food, and that place may or may not be great.
No, food. Look, food. Maybe because I'm going with Europeans and their taste is a little more refined, but we tend to eat pretty well. I ain't gonna lie, we tend to eat pretty well. And look, most of the time we're going to places where food is relatively inexpensive, right? So. If we're out there in Madagascar, $7 could get you pretty far.
Huh. I went on a boat trip once with a friend of the family, and he has his boat, and he used to guide river tours down the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. So he was very great boatman, and he was used to cooking for like 30 people. So we'd stop, and he's just got this huge amount of food, and he's cooking it all, and we're just eating to our heart's content until we're sick. And then he's like throwing, extra food into the river. We're like, oh my gosh, that's so much waste. Like, why did you? I only know how to cook for 30. I just don't know any other way. We're like, we'll learn another way. It's crazy.
Right.
But we ate. I probably gained weight on that trip for sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, I generally gain weight, so that's good. So for me, that's a plus.
That's pretty funny. Well, and I know Nick, right? Nick invariably does that based on his own. He's so regimented at home that then he goes on these trips, and to your point, he's like, "Oh, a bowl of noodles is 10 cents. Let me have 7, or whatever."
Right. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's awesome. I guess so I think this is kind of the classic way that Justin and I have been doing these things, and it's so awesome to hear all these details and sides that, visibility into it that having never gone, I just don't have that insight into. So it's a little less of a fight. I think there's clear, we even agree there's clear pros and cons on either side, but really great to have all this detail and perspective that I feel like, honestly, these businesses rely on people like you being an advocate for them, because otherwise it's just sort of, fancy pictures or whatever. But there is that price point. There is the, to some extent, a reduced agency and all these different things that would dissuade someone like me beyond saying, oh, wow, that is a pretty picture. And I don't speak Thai, or I don't speak, whatever it is, or I can imagine difficulties, heck, even in places where there is less of a language. South Africa, that doesn't, I don't feel like getting kidnapped. That's not on my bucket list of things to happen. Right. Brazil, like
Colombia.
Not things that I'm looking. Yeah, exactly. Not things that are high on my to-do list. So I certainly appreciate that there are contexts where that would be helpful. Or not even helpful helpful is too much of an understatement. Essential, right? Or even, where the legislation requires it or whatever. So I think that's super clear. So it's great to have someone with that experience really speak to the positives beyond just, well, you need to, so you got no choice, right?
Right.
I think you've done really well with that.
Yeah. Well, I hope people have enjoyed kind of the nuts and bolts of things. We probably should have you back on to talk about all the cool animals you've seen. Do you have one that just burns, it's burned into your brain and will stick with you forever? One of your favorite finds you can throw out there for us?
My goodness, that's a tough one, man.
Yeah,
it's like picking your kid. Which is your favorite kid?
or just a memorable one, I guess. Yeah.
Oh man. Huh.
I know I have one on one of my, I think it was my first trip to Australia. I went to the rainforest, and I knew you could find Boyd's forest dragons there, and so that was kind of what I was looking for. And I had the search image. I knew what kind of size tree they would be on, and I just scanned every tree in that freaking forest. And I went the first day I was there, I went on my own, didn't find one. But the area was so cool. I wanted to take my dad back there because I was on the trip with him. So we went back the next day, and, right when you started to have to take the loop back, I spotted one on a tree, and that image is just burned into my brain. It was very cool to see that animal right where it should be, on the size of tree that they said they'd be on, and just sitting there on the side of it. It was really cool. And that's just stuck in my brain. One of my favorite experiences.
Oh man. Okay. Okay. Let's, I'm going to pick one. Let's see. All right. I'll pick one from not quite, I guess there was guides. I did have guides, but not necessarily a trip with the people I go often with. It was when I went to Peru.
Uh-huh.
This was about 2 years ago. I went to Peru, met a friend there, and then eventually went out on my own, essentially, with to a lodge called Oturango out there, and we were looking for bushmasters, and it was crazy. We were herping all day, all night for like 2 days, and it was dry. It was pretty dry. It hadn't rained for a while in Peru, and nothing was moving essentially. And for one whole day, it rained. I mean, it poured. I've never seen rain like this, right? For a whole day. And then that night, we're like, no, tonight's going to be a good night. Like, I mean, the guy, John, and you're like, no, tonight's going to be a good night. Like, we're going to go out. We're going to find something.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. And I'm like, all right, this is a place. Well, there's a place known for bushmasters. We know they're around the vicinity of the lodge. We know that they're here. We just have to find one. And we set off, and we're looking. And I mean, been a lot of places. The Amazonian jungle is unbelievable.
Yeah,
it is the quietest and loudest place on earth. I don't know how else to describe it, other than oftentimes you feel like you can hear your heartbeat, and other times you can barely, the cacophony is so loud. So it really depends. But and look, you turn off your flashlight, and the herper next to you could be 3 trees away, and you can't see him at all.
Yeah,
you can't see even his flashlight. Like this is like deep Amazonian jungle, and
thick forest.
Really thick forest. And we're out there, we're looking, and I get a call snake, and I come running. And again, to your point, right? John was the first one to spot it. However, John lost it.
Oh,
right. Had no idea where he saw it, because by the time he came and found me, he totally forgot where he had seen it.
Oh no.
He's like, it's that way somewhere. I'm like, yeah, but there's like 8 different animal trails going off of there. So then the search began, right? We know we saw a snake. He saw 2 eyes, and he came running to find me. He saw like a glint of eyes. So in my opinion, that probably was a bushmaster if you saw eye shine like that. So got really excited, started running around, looking around, and we just couldn't find it. It's like maybe 20, 30 minutes. It's like, this is it. Like, this is it. We lost it. Like maybe it went down a hole. Maybe like, who knows what, it's over. I guess we have to keep looking. Yeah. Something told me, like, I think he ran probably further than he imagined. Right. So I'm like, I'm going to keep going. It's like, I went way further out than I think that we even looked, and I kept going, made a couple rights, a couple lefts. And between a fork of like 4 animal trails sat this huge bushmaster.
Wow.
Huge female bushmaster in ambush position. On the crux of like 4 animal trails, like exactly where they say they are, like down to the T.
Wow.
And they call them shushupe. That's what they call them. That's the local word for bushmaster. And they're considered to be like a spirit of the forest, because they often are said that they appear and disappear. Right. And what they're trying to describe is their ecology, is that they most of the time are underground, right? They're in tree hollows, they're underground, they're under brush, and every once in a while they come out and they'll sit right in the middle of either a person's trail, animal trail, any kind of trail, and they'll sit right in the middle and wait for an animal to come by so they could snag it. And so it became this kind of like, they show up randomly. You can hike out, and on the way back find one sitting on the trail. So they have this mystique about them being this ghost of the forest, essentially. Yeah. And so seeing that female there, I mean, was just unbelievable. It was one of the coolest things ever. And, it was just, and it's the bushmaster. It is the to me, the pinnacle. If it's not the some people may say kings or the pinnacle of venomous snakes. I disagree. I'm going to say that the bushmaster to me is absolutely the king of snakes. And it was super cool to see her like that.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. Yeah, that's the stuff, that's what keeps us going out there and keeps us looking for these things in the wild, and I know that sometimes like missing on a target species is what drives me to go back and try again and you see if I can find that thing, so very cool. Well, if you have any kind of final thoughts or some summation of your thoughts, and maybe if you want to throw out that group that you go with commonly, just so people have that if they want to check into it.
Sure. So final thoughts, I say, if you wait around and you think about doing something rather than doing it, you're wasting time. Just get out there and do it. Even if that requires you to contact somebody else to help you get there. Ultimately, how you get there is sometimes not as important as just going and getting there. And so don't think that you have to do this crazy solo situation and that there's no potential benefit of going as a group. There's a lot of benefits going as a group, including my favorite, which is meeting new people. So go ahead, go have fun, go to places that scare you, go to places that you can never imagine going, and you'll be surprised, one, how strong you are, and two, how big and small the world is.
Well said. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's one of my my favorite points that you brought up was, I mean, just get out there and do it. If you need to have a tour group to do it, then make it happen. If you want to plan a trip on your own, make it happen. That's great advice. Go see the world, because our time here is not long enough, right? Correct.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So if I only limited myself, right, to things I can do on my own, I would have gotten Africa would not have been my favorite continent on planet Earth. It's just I have to be willing to do that. So if you are interested in any of the trips that I've talked about, at least some of them, a lot of the times I go with Herp. Again, it's Herpetological Education and Research Project. Their web address is Herp, so it's pretty easy. Herp.be. Be's for Belgium, so it's pretty easy to find them. And then you can see a lot of the trips they'll have there. And I think you know where they are currently? Where's that? Western Australia.
Oh, really? One of my favorite places on earth.
I know. And what's crazy is I got some information on that tour. I'm not there, but I got some information at least on some of the itinerary where they were in. It is literally exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
Down to exactly how much time I would spend there. Like it's like almost a full 3 weeks. Like it's hardcore. It's awesome.
That's cool.
They're having a great time there. They've seen a lot of stuff already. So nice. God bless them.
I'd be curious to hear kind of like or see the list of their finds, just to kind of maybe convince me that would be helpful. If you can wow me with your find list, then that might convince me to do that.
I mean, so if you jump on their Facebook page, you can see at least some of what they, especially Brian's, if you look at what they're finding. So they're doing pretty well. They're doing pretty well. Cool. So that's what they're doing now. So I think their next trip coming up, they're going to Suriname. Unfortunately, I'm not going to that one. I wish I could.
Yeah,
but that looks amazing.
How many trips do you try to hit a year?
Man, if I could, as many as I can,
or every other year,
as many as I can afford, essentially. For me, actually, the issue is a lot with time. A lot of the places I still want to visit, I don't want to visit for a week. And it seems like every year I'm getting more and more responsibilities at work, so it becomes harder and harder to take these trips. So as of right now, technically for this year, I have nothing planned. But I just came back from Madagascar, so I feel pretty good. I have so many photos to go through still that I have plenty to keep me busy for the next year at least. But right now I have nothing planned. That doesn't mean I won't go anywhere. Just possibly maybe not a trip with them this year.
Yeah. Speaking of which, where can people see your photos?
Oh my goodness, the big question. What's interesting about that? If you go to my Facebook page, you could probably see some of my photos. But to be fair, I haven't posted a lot of my photos recently. What I have found,
you're denying these people of phenomenal photos.
So Well, let me preface this by saying this. I think that social media, while it's a beautiful thing in some ways, right, gets us talking, gets us to find like-minded individuals. It could also tend to make you feel competitive in a lot of ways. And what I found was I had to, especially with my photography, I had to sit back and think, okay, why am I doing this? Just like herping. Why am I herping? Sure. Am I herping to prove something to somebody else? Am I herping to prove something to myself? Am I doing it for my own enjoyment? Am I doing it to get some kind of likes, clicks, that sort of thing? And a lot of what I was feeling pressure to get my photos up, get the album produced, make sure people see it, get those likes. And I felt like that was kind of weighing in on my hobby in a way. As photography is first and foremost my hobby. And so if you've noticed for the last few years, I haven't really posted much of my photos. Luckily, when you were at Carpet Fest, we sat down and I showed you a lot of photos that I've in my back pocket. Eventually, the hope is I will probably get a website for my photos so they can live somewhere indefinitely and they can be presented in a way I want them to be presented. Yeah. And I'm doing it for the right reasons. Okay. Well, that being said, you go. The minute that website gets put out there, I will make sure that I will let you know.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm telling you, people, this guy's photographs are incredible, like really amazing. And the species that you found are just very diverse and wide ranging, and just, had my jaw hit the floor multiple times. So, yep, I look forward to that day. Now, Rob, we haven't forgot about you. Do you have any kind of final statements, kind of on your side of things?
No, not really. I really appreciate you coming on, Zach, and giving us this insight. And great to hear about maybe the ideation around a website to present your images and stuff. I'm sort of doing the same thing with my website in terms of a space. Yeah, I think we're aligned in terms of the pros and cons of social media and presentation and how you're doing it. And I do feel like, maybe that's its own conversation in terms of the social media content creators. I feel like they often misjudge who their audience is. And sometimes I think there's a dulling effect that comes from, especially if they're stuck in a particular area, or they really like to go to a certain area or whatever, of saying, oh, not a big night, only found 15 alterna, whatever. And it's like, I understand that message comes across as like, okay, you're pandering to the 5 other herper bros that you consider to be your competition or whatever. And you're kind of putting on airs for that. The answer to me a lot of the time is genuinely like, if you really feel that way, go find something else to do with your time. Because as Justin said, there's not enough of it. So go find something else to do. In reality, I think the sort of saying that for whatever reason, to this small audience, neglecting the fact that 99.9% of your audience would be super excited to see one, and that's not really great messaging. So I'm with you that a lot of the time, the way it's presented or the way that we take it in does no justice at all to either the animal or the work that it took to find it. Either 100%. Of those things.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Very cool. Well, I think this has been a nice discussion. Thank you guys for your points of view and for all the information. Hopefully this has been helpful to the listener, and appreciate you listening. But I don't know. I like to end the show with kind of talking about any big reptile news or anything like that you've come across. I don't know. You guys got anything cool or notable lately? Obviously,
so I have one. I have one here for you, Zach. So this threw me for a loop. So our buddy Nipper sent this to me this morning. We have been chatting. So on the Chameleon Academy podcast, there's a fellow in the UK who's produced Namaqua chameleons, and he come on to talk about them. There was a little bit of an issue with the upload, so I had to go seek it out separately because I guess the initial upload cut off at 15 minutes, but in reality it should have been an hour and 15 minutes, whatever. So if it shows as short, then go seek it elsewhere, be it iTunes or the Spotify feed. I guess it doesn't update or whatever. So that initial upload kind of threw it for a loop, but I reached out and the answer was, oh, you can get it, but you have to access it in a different way than what I'm used to. Bill told me. So anyway, I wasn't, Germany, they have everything. So I wasn't surprised, but it was good to hear someone kind of freely talking about that, because talk about a badass lizard, right? Yeah. Zach, talk about, oh my gosh, that's one of the items that I've seen, heard you talk about or see that you've posted. That's one that certainly hits for me. But then, and Nipper said, so the guy who was on the show was offering offspring that he had produced in the UK or whatever. And doubtless that'll mean that maybe in the US at some point they'll have some, they're quite spendy as it is or whatever. But then Nipper sent me an advertisement today saying, oh, well, our leucistic Namaqua chameleons. And so it reminded me of the thing with King Orem, how like we're talking about something with presumably a very small initial founder population, and there's a damn mutation in them, in that, like, you know, out of whatever, a pair or two or three or animals. Right. And already, you know, and it's like, talk about a mix. Yeah, that kind of put me for a loop today.
And it's not just ones that can turn bright white because they're hot.
Well, who knows, right? Yeah. Exactly. Presumably not, because they have normal ones and these as well. Yeah. There wasn't a photo or anything like that, but it was the listing, I think, out of Germany. But it was just kind of put me on tilt there for a bit.
You know, it's interesting because when I see, you know, there's a lot of thoughts like, okay, well, why does morphs pop up in captive populations so often? And I think without that natural selection happening, so it happens. I mean, I don't know what the percentage of baby Namaqua chameleons make it to adulthood, but I know it's really, really small, like really small. And so when you talk about when you take away that natural selection for a few generations, all of a sudden these morphs that would pop out even in the wild that would immediately be decimated are able to continue to go. And so it's interesting to see how quickly that can happen. It's really, Namaqua chameleons are pretty phenomenal. Yeah. Pretty phenomenal creatures. You know, it's interesting. Here's a leaving on topic here. Yeah. You know, we're there with, we obviously found Namaqua chameleons when we were in Namibia, and, you know, and of course, just like any other chameleon, you go to pick it up. Just like, you know, you find any chameleon, you go do your thing. And thank goodness we did have a guide, right? Because there's no way where you can find this, right? You can't Google this really, but touching a Namaqua chameleon will pretty much doom it to death in the wild. Really? And not for the reasons you think. You think, maybe it's the stress. Maybe it'll expel its urates and cause it to be dehydrated. All the things reason why you don't pick up a tortoise in the wild, that sort of thing. But it's not that. It's the reason that the minute your hands, they have no scent. So the minute that you touch one, you are now transferring scent onto that animal, and that animal lives in a place where hyenas live. So you have to understand that its predator is just looking for any inkling of scent in order to track that animal down. It will be gone. So by you touching it, you're transferring your scent onto that animal, and that animal will not make it to night.
Wow, that's interesting.
I mean, that's amazing to think about. Is that they're that, because that's part of how they survive is by not having a scent.
I'm curious how they work that out. You know what I mean? Is there studies where?
Yeah, that's what I was told. The guy who told me, he's been there his whole. You know, he seems like a very knowledgeable guy. Just made sense. He was like, "Oh, do not, you know, anything else fair game." But we know for sure that if they can't run very well. They rely 100% on their camouflage.
Not a lot of cover out there.
Correct. So you can't, if you have a little scent to you and you're looking for, and there's brown hyenas, believe me, I saw plenty of them when I was there. They will track them down and eat them.
Wow. So, how hard were they to find, the Namaqua chameleons?
The first one we found driving.
Okay.
It was up on a rock, literally just perched up on a rock. Yeah. You know, as clear as day, just sitting there up on a rock. We're like, what? You know, we slam brakes. Everybody runs, like, it's beautiful. It was beautiful. The other times we found them out in the grasses and other various things. And we even found a baby one morning. Cool. That was really, really cool. Wow. The Namaquas, they're pretty prevalent. So they tend to be hit by car a lot. So
that's too bad.
But they're
that would be
cool.
hard to see a DOR.
DOR. Luckily for them, there's not a lot of cars, but
that's true. Pretty low traffic areas out there.
Amazing species. Amazing.
Yeah. I saw a really cool Instagram post from Matt Somerville. He had gone up to the Iron Range, maybe last month or something, and during the wet season, right? And so obviously it's probably the hottest time of the year up there, and he observed a green tree that had, come down. He found it at night, and then he went back and found it up in the tree during the day. And it was sitting in the sunlight, like basking, like out in the open, kind of where the sun had full bore on it, and he said it had to have been very hot in the sunlight, sitting there for that long. And it just couldn't imagine how hot that animal was getting. So that was kind of an interesting observation for me. And I asked him, do you think it had eaten recently? Was it digesting a meal? And he said, not that he could tell. It just looked, it was just up there in the sunlight. So kind of interesting. On the same trip, he located a juvenile as well, a yellow neonate, and showed kind of a zoomed out photo of it just sitting on the edge of the forest, like kind of out in the open, where you'd like, how is this not getting eaten by a bird or an owl or something like that? But kind of a cool observation as well. But I guess they kind of hang out on the forest edge, and that juvenile coloration, either the yellow or the red, is actually very camouflaging of the animals to owls or nocturnal, bird predators. Even some of the diurnal predators don't see that color. It just blends in with the greenery. So for us, it sticks out like a sore thumb, but for them, they blend in really nicely for their natural predators. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It's like the tigers in the orange coat.
Yeah.
They're bright orange to us. We can see them pretty well, but their prey
can't. A deer sees them as green instead of orange. Yeah. Correct. That was kind of cool. I love those nature shows. I still remember the first time I saw an Namaquah chameleon on Nature, that program on PBS that showing like half of it was white and half of it was black as it's warming up in the morning. Just crazy stuff. So nature's wonderful.
Yeah.
On kind of a sad note, Brian Barczyk passed away this week, and, as I guess a polarizing figure he was in the reptile industry, you see a lot of haters and a lot of people who just adore the man. I was kind of on the side of the adoration. I remember meeting him the first time, and just a really super positive, helpful person, gave us a lot of time. Me and Ben were new, at a big show, and just, he just sat and talked with us and gave us advice and was really positive and excited, and just a really nice guy. I just had a really, all the experiences I had with him. We got to speak at the same reptile show out in Australia. And so I got to share the stage with Brian and give a talk, after before or after he did. I can't remember. I think he was probably the closer. The Aussies love that guy, but just always a really super positive and happy person. So I think it's a loss for the reptile community as a whole, but
yeah, I agree
about his family. It's a rough loss, I'm sure, but taken too soon for sure. But,
when it comes to, when you're on top of the game, you're gonna gather ire. It's just the way it is. And the reality is he's always been a very positive person. He was always very positive. And, we have to look at how he affected not only just the reptile community, but the broader public. He was our face. You can have problems with that, but that's the reality. And he was a positive face.
Yeah.
Right. Sure. Rather than so many negative faces that we have now, especially on YouTube, my goodness. So he was a positive face, and he would surely be missed. And we were all inspired by him, whether we want to admit it or not. That's the reality.
Yeah. No, I've heard a lot of folks that have said that, he's the reason they got into reptiles and kind of had that Steve Irwin type presence in regards to the number of people that he reached and presented reptiles in a positive light. That's a real feat.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. In law school, when I was up in Michigan, literally kept a roof over me and my family's head, selling in baby rhino rat snakes and Thai bamboo rats and a whole host of things. Every season we take a whole host of them over to them. And as I say, literally paid for the roof over the head with this. Definitely a sweet guy.
Yeah. He'll be missed. Yeah. Well, on that cheery note, we'll thank Eric and Owen and the NPR crew for letting us put these shows out, and thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of Reptile Fight Club.